My name is George Santana, Maestro de Armas of Sala de Armas Santana. What we're going to be doing in this tape is practicing a little bit of rapier and dagger concepts, sword and dagger concepts, and stick and dagger concepts, as postulated by Diestro Escrima. Now, those three are three separate paradigms. A lot of times what some schools will do, some people will blend all three concepts into one, or sword and dagger and stick and dagger. And the students, unfortunately, aren't told how to differentiate between the two or three, and consequently they'll make mistakes when they're fighting stick and dagger, and make gross mistakes that can cost them injury and so forth if they were to face someone else skilled in the other aspects. So what we're going to do in this tape is kind of differentiate the different paradigms, try to study both, how to apply them, and talk a little bit about the history. The history, as I said before in my other tapes, goes back a long way. The Filipino arts and the European sword arts are actually related, very close cousins. The way that's translated to different countries is many. Take for instance the rapier and the cloak. In Mexico, it translates into the sarape and the machete. My father was born in 1926, and as a young man, and as a young boy, he witnessed many duels and so forth with the sarape and the machete, and they use it much the same way, both to block and so forth, or to throw in the opponent's eyes and cut. So a lot of similarities, and I'll talk a little bit about them as we go through the tape, but I think you're going to get a lot out of this tape, and I hope you have fun with it. Again, I'll differentiate when we jump from one mental paradigm or mindset to another. All right? Thank you. Watch. Okay, now what we're going to do is start off with a rapier type thrust concepts. The reason why we're going to start off with this is because most people watching this, if you're into the Filipino arts, you're pretty well grounded in the cutting and the cutting methods of the Filipino arts. The Filipino arts are primarily, I would say 80% cutting. And the reason behind that is the fact that the thrusting weapon, the rapier, is a consequence of a development that happened over centuries. In other words, the first rapiers that existed in the European continent consisted of a cut and thrust weapon. It was a little bit heavier weapon. They thrusted and cut with it. So in the Philippines, when the Spanish occupied the Philippines, their primary weapon was a rapier, but it was a cut and thrust rapier. In about the late 1700s, Angelo popularized the small sword, which is what we have now as modern fencing, primarily a thrusting weapon, which was used for dueling. Of course, the soldier still had a saber, and the nobles had their swords, but primarily for dueling, what was used was basically a long poignard, or a weapon that was used like a long bar with a sharp point. Because of the development, they realized that, hey, the thrust arrived always before the cut. That's not to say the cut can't be utilized properly, but since we're in the Filipino arts, we already have the cut, we're going to start with the thrusting weapon. But I'd like to show similarities between our Western cousin and show how it applies and how it can apply to the Filipino arts. Like, say, for instance, the parries. They have 8 basic parries in the sword arts. Whether you study Italian, Spanish, or French, you'll see these guards. The first one, as they call prim, or primero, is done this way. It takes care of our outside line here. This is done this way. Prim. Second, or second, is done here. And if you notice, my guard is basically, those in the Filipino arts, is a tri-stance. If I am in a triangle stance, a male tri, and if I bring my foot back down flat, point my forward foot so that my feet are perpendicular or at right angles, you see I'm in a guard. If I just turn my foot, I'm in a tri-stance. So it'll be a real easy transition. So if I'm here in second, I can go to third. And if you notice with these, we have pronation and supination, or basically knuckles out or knuckles down. So second is knuckles out. Third is here. And if, for those of you that aren't familiar with the Filipino arts, if I'm in first, and if I bring my dagger hand out, I'm in what we call the cruzada, the cross. If I go to second, or second, if I bring my hand out into the tri-stance now, I'm bandi banda. If I'm in third with the knuckles out, if you can imagine me holding the stick, and if I put my hand up, I'm blocking with a brace. And if I'm in fourth, knuckles out, blocking with a brace also again. 5, pointing. It's transitional if I'm doing an inside move in some of the Escrima arts. 6, same thing for outside move. Okay. 7 and 8. Now, how would 7 and 8 work in the Filipino arts? Okay. 6. If Pat were to strike me low here, and I'm doing a block here, in the Filipino arts, this would be like a number 9 disarm or strip. If I'm doing, how would I translate number 8 or octave? If he struck here, and I carried his weapon across, I'm in the A position here. I'm in position to apply my counter. Thank you. So, that's 7 and 8 here. Now, when we're practicing these, we also work with the strikes. Now, the simple strikes and thrusts of the Filipino arts are also applicable in the sword arts. Like, say, for instance, our number 6 for thrusting resembles an embrocada from the old Spanish system, an old Italian. Okay? The stoccada is here, which is a basic thrust. And the punta revés is like our number 7. So you have very many correlations that we can use and that are applicable and actually fit very well in the Filipino arts. The other thing too, with your parries and so forth, you have a dagger hand, which is one of the keys that I'll show you a little bit about and how you apply the alive dagger hand. That's one of the things in the Filipino arts that has been an enigma to me, something I couldn't figure out in some of the sword and dagger arts. If this is an alive hand, why does it become a dead hand when you put a dagger and you're working sword and dagger? Shouldn't it be just as alive as the primary weapon? Shouldn't it be able to move? So what we do in Diestro Escrima, we stay away from just the deadpan thrusts after we're done. We make it alive and we make it able to attack and defend and do a variety of things. Anyway, we'll just watch it and I'll show you how we do that. Okay, before we get into how we use a dagger, I want to clarify, because we're going to do the same thing with a dagger, what we're doing with the sword, or with the stick for that matter. Once we get involved, we can do this same kind of drills, same kind of movements with the stick and dagger, with the sword and dagger, and with the rapier and dagger, with certain differences, and I'll point those out. But let's get through the parries first. Again, the first parry, prim, or the first position is here, taking care of our outside line. Okay, from here. As I go to the second position, I'm here. See, third, knuckles out. Fourth, knuckles out. Now on 5, my knuckles are up. My hand is supinated. Okay, 6, 7, and 8. Now, how we apply that with the daggers, how we make the dagger alive now, we do the same thing with the dagger. So if I can go prim or 1 with the dagger, or with the sword, I can do it with the dagger. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And if I were to have, let's say for instance, for those of you into the Filipino arts, you have all your cuts and so forth, just for history's sake, for history's purposes, I'll give you an example of the terminologies that they used for the cutting weapons, the cut and thrust swords. These movements here for cutting would be called mandritas. These would be squalembratos. Okay? If I were to cut straight down, that would be a fendente, and up would be a montante, and across would be a tondo. And like I said, the reason why we use these terminologies is to bring a little bit of past of the history of the blade arts to life. The other thing we're going to do now is I'll show you how to apply some of the concepts in the Filipino arts. Let's say, for instance, we have 2 sticks. Okay, some of the things that we can do with a rapier and dagger. Say, for instance, in the Filipino arts, let's say, for instance, I come in, Jared strikes me here. If, let's say, for instance, I deflect and come in here and I execute a 6. If, however, let's say, for instance, I want to thrust with a 6, and he goes to block, this movement here underneath is called the disengage. If I were to do the same movement and he were to block and I went over, it would be a cutover. So whether I'm here with the weapon in a classical fencing position, and if I come in and he blocks and I disengage, the concept is the same, whether we use the stick or whether we use the two-edged kris, or if we use whatever weapon we decided to use, our dagger, for instance. The dagger should be able to execute the same kind of motion and movement. Disengages, cutovers. If, however, let's say, for instance, he's thrusting me, and I counter sixth, okay, and I counter with a six parry. If he tries to disengage me, I can re-counter six, which is called contra six or counter sixth. Same thing goes for card or fifth. If I'm here and he disengages me, I can counter and re-riposte or counter. Okay, so the principles are all the same. Now what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to show you how to apply this with the stick art, since not everybody has, thank you, not everybody has sabers and foils and fancy swords. I'll show you how to apply the same kind of concepts using your sticks. Say for instance I have, now I have the guards, all 8 guards in each hand. So I have prim here, which is 1, or prim with the dagger. Let's say I'm in position 1 with my dagger. That doesn't say I can't do all my cuts, all my thrusts, my disengages, my counter 6th, counter 4th, counter 5th, my cutovers, cut over this way or here while I'm in prim. Now I'm in second. I do the same thing with it. I counter here. Then I go to 3rd. Now if you notice, I'm not in either a static left-hand foot position, left foot forward or right foot forward. I vary it because when you're working sword and dagger, you create the opening and you apply your final coup de grace or your final cut depending on how you've created that opening. So your left foot might be forward, your right foot might be forward. Now I'm in counter 6th, okay? Here, or underneath. Now the whole idea now is I should be able to do the same thing with my dagger. Cutovers, disengages, and now if I apply all of them, I'm in a position to use any one at any time. And if you look at my advanced drill tape, you'll see how this applies to some of the drills that we use. And I'll give you a little bit of idea of how that applies, just a little bit. But for an in-depth look for that drill tape, and you'll see how many different ways you can apply it. Watch. All right, now we're going to show a little bit how we apply some of the principles in this. To give you a good example of how we start off with the basics, and then we up the ante a little bit by applying some of the disengage and so forth. We start off with a drill called the basic Hubad Luba drill. It's a basic 4-count drill. I'm going to have Scott and Mike show you a little bit. Just keep an eye on what they're doing. It's a basic 4-count drill, and it's meant to develop coordination. Go ahead. Okay, now they add multiple hits with their stick, their long stick. Okay, just stay in that one spot. There you go. Now, by the way, an in-depth look of this drill is in my advanced drill tape, so we're just going to do a little bit of this. Now, if they start adding their dagger hand with this, okay, you get an idea of what's going on. Okay, guys, thank you. Appreciate it. Now, Pat, come up here, and what we're going to do is do the same thing, but if you'll notice, we're going to start elongating our movements just slightly. And just keep an eye on what we're doing. We're going to go slow a little bit. We're going to go slow. And if you'll see, we'll stay in one motion, in one spot. Normally, what we would do is start using the different lunges, the step lunges, step and lunge, and so forth. Okay, but if you notice what I'm doing here, when he thrusts low, let's say he thrusts low, I'll execute the second, or second. I come in here, he continues the motion. Okay, if he thrusts low on this side, I might go prim, here. Okay, now if he thrusts high, I might come in high. Now when he comes in and rethrust, I'll put a disengage and cut here. Continue motion, or come in around here. Same thing happens with his dagger. Okay, or from right here, let's say for instance I wanted to work on, say for instance the movement passata sotto. And let's say for instance he thrusts, at one of his thrusts he decides to thrust my head. Come in here with a passata sotto. From right here, let's say for instance he wants to come in and thrust with his dagger to my neck. Here would be the inquartata, or the old movement for stepping out of the way. Now this can be done fun. We're going kind of slow here, but to give you an example, I'll show you what it would look like with a real blade. Watch. All right, now we're going to use semi-live blades here. These are a little bit sharp, so we're going to go kind of slow to show you some of the concept that we're using from here. When he comes into thrust, I have the option of pairing with the dagger, or disengaging with the dagger, or cutting over with the dagger, or sliding down and cutting. From right here, as I cut, I also have the option of coming in, turning, and as he comes in to parry with his dagger, I can cut his dagger hand here. Now from right here, as I continue my motion, I can cut here and finish the move here. If he comes in again, I can parry, step out of the way into a male or female tri-stance, and cut and angle him out. If you were to decide to cut here, I can throw him off balance here and cut and finish him off here. And then we can still stay with the drill. We still play with it and finish with the drill. So what we do is we work with the stick and dagger for safety's sake, and maybe sometimes we work with the foil or the épée or the saber with proper rated fencing mats and so forth. But as you can see, we also practice the concepts with the live blades. Cutting the feet here, or if I'm practicing mainly with the rapier type weapon, I'll be using my disengages, continue motion, my do them all here. See? That's how we practice some of the concepts. So you see that some of the rapier type motion and movements can beat the cut. But the cut can also be utilized effectively against a rapier. But again, it takes practice, and as I said, the time-wise, in Diestro Escrima, we favor the thrust over the cut. It's quicker depending on who's using it, but if you use properly, it'll always beat the cut. Anyway, we're going to go on to another example of a drill, how we apply this, and I think you'll get a better glimpse, okay? Watch. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to apply some of the same concepts with the épée and the saber to a drill we call sombrada. Some of you are familiar with sombrada. For familiarity's sake, what we're going to do first is we're going to work with the stick with sombrada, give you a real quick idea of how it's applied, how we do it with the stick. For instance, when Pat comes in here, we start off with, basically it's a 10 count movement. Okay, it's a real basic intermediate type drill. Again, with the sombrada, you can also apply your dagger. So for instance, if I'm doing sombrada and he comes in to strike overhead, I can come and catch with a dagger and thrust immediately. And he can still finish off his movements, continue motion. I can thrust or cut, parry with the dagger, and thrust. And on and on and on. How that applies with the saber, we get the sabers, the fencing sabers. It applies the same way because these are primarily cutting weapons. A lot of cavalry and so forth exercises were taken from the saber, And these are sport fencing sabers, and of course the heavier real sabers were much different and carried a lot more heft and so forth. But the principles are still the same. If I'm here, we're still using the same kind of motion and movement. The same principles apply. Okay? And I can cut and so forth. However, if I'm here, I can still apply the dagger. Come in here with a dagger, check, cut, and here and so forth. Finish off here. So it's a real good drill for learning some of your basics. However, when we get with the thrusting weapon, the epee, it's a little bit different. We like I said before, we go very slowly and carefully. And right now we're not wearing any fencing mask, any rated fencing mask, so we're going to go very slow. But the principles behind the sombrata are still the same type of target area, except now we're just doing primarily thrusting. And again, as I showed before, the same principles of parrying, counter sixth, counter fourth, and so forth, all apply. And if I have my dagger, the same thing goes. From here, so for instance, if the first target appears up here, I might parry with a fourth or a fifth or a first. Now my counter might be what we call an embocado or a number sixth here, and he would parry. His next motion would be low. I would go counter secondo, counter second. My next motion is to his heart, so he's going to have to parry outwards. Now he's going to counter immediately, so mine is a counter six. See what I did? The motion wasn't wide, it was just a small motion, just enough to get him out of the way. Now as I thrust back at him to the center, he parries out, comes in, high, I have to recounter, he parries out. Now from there, as he parries low, I can go first position prime, or I can go septime. It doesn't matter, because from here I'm going to come in right. And then we continue on the motion and movement. Okay? It goes on and on and on. Here. That's it. And for safety's sake, like I said, when we go fast, we want to use proper rated equipment and so forth. Then again, you can introduce a dagger in this, and so we'll have a lot of fun. And then pretty soon it resembles the multiple hit puño sombrata. So the whole idea behind studying rapier and dagger is the fact that most of us already have the cutting weapon, stick and dagger and so forth. But when we transition to rapier and dagger, it's a whole different mindset, a whole different paradigm. So if you master that, you can go in and out of each mental mindset very easily. Last but not least, we're going to go through stick and dagger and how our stick and dagger is different from most others. Watch. Okay, now I'll talk a little bit about stick and dagger. Again, stick and dagger is a separate, whole different mindset from sword and dagger, which is primarily cutting, and rapier and dagger, which is primarily thrusting. If you have a stick, you do not make wide motions so that your opponent can see where you're coming from. You see a lot of, I'll call them stereotypical moves. You see a stick and dagger taught this way. I know some of you that are involved in Filipino arts just love to meet somebody like that. Hey, it's open invitation. Also, some of the stick and dagger, you see motions here, coming up here, real wide, or another stereotypical here, 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 and then down, and so forth. I'll give you a real quick key, besides all that I've showed you so far, on how to differentiate between stick and dagger and sword and dagger, and rapier and dagger. If those of you have the Filipino technique or exercise called sinawali, refer to my first tapes. If not, it's really a 6-count motion movement. Now let's just give you a real rough idea of 2 sticks in motion. Now if I were to continue the round motion with my sword hand or stick hand and started thrusting with my dagger, that kind of give you a real rough idea of some of the motion and movement for sword and dagger. If I were to thrust both of them in the sinawali, give you kind of a rough idea on rapier and dagger. Now, of course, you combine everything we've gone through, the disengages and so forth, for rapier and dagger, and sword and dagger, you keep it round. And the only time you really want wide motions is if you have a heavy weapon. That's the only time it's really excusable. You have a kabilan or a big heavy broadsword or a sword that you have to use a lot of swing and have just to lift it. However, if you're using stick and dagger and you're using wide motions like this, you don't want to do that, okay? You really don't, because A good rapier man, or someone that knows rapier and dagger, and even if he has a stick, he's gonna counter you right down the middle, just using body positioning and so forth. He's gonna counter you. Some of the ways that I teach stick and dagger is using the multiple hubad-lubad drill, the 4 count. Pat? The way is again, refer to my other tape, my drill tape. Why don't you on this side here? The way I teach it here is we're using the 4 count. This first motion and movement with my stick is free form. Second motion is here, third here, fourth here. At every which way, I'm also utilizing any openings to hit. Now with my free hand or dagger hand, I'm also cutting simultaneously, all in and out. The same principle applies if I'm using stick and dagger, or stick or empty fighting close with the stick. If I'm here, I'm using a lot of hard abanicos, Wu ticks, changing motion. From here, I'm coming in here. With this motion here, I'm also eye grabbing or grabbing the hair, so forth, and finishing off here. If I'm here in this position, I'm throwing a body punch here and using the butt of the stick here. From right here, if I'm in this position and he opens up to here to hit me, I have the opportunity to power hit, use a power shot here. Power shot. If I'm here, I have the opportunity to power shot here, or to enter here. So, okay, the whole idea behind this is, even if I'm here and I'm taking advantage of this, if you don't take advantage of this hand, then you let me win. If, however, you catch and you grab my stick, I have a punch and an elbow. So from right here, what you want to do with these power shots, thank you, with these inside motion and movements, you want to practice your, what I call effortless hitting. Effortless hitting, just relaxing, letting the power flow through. To give credit where credit is due, there's a group that calls themselves the Dog Brothers, and they have wonderful, powerful assist shots. What I would suggest, though, when you use your powerful assist shots, you follow through with your hands. But inside stick fighting and stick and dagger fighting should all be compact. Should all be compact. If I'm here, I'm fighting, I'm using my abanicos to the max here, with my dagger here. Never wide. Never wide. You see somebody wide, appreciate them. Okay, just appreciate them, because you know better. Anyway, to conclude this tape, the whole idea behind this tape wasn't to cast aspersions on any other style or system, but to give you an insight on the do's and don'ts of each paradigm and each separate paradigm. Don't confuse them. If you do blend them, know why you're blending them. But if you're going to teach someone, delineate each mental mindset and each paradigm. Okay? Anyway, I hope you've had fun. Work with this. If you have any questions, feel free to call me. My number's on the back of the tape. If you got a Renegade copy, buy the tape and give me a call. See you later.